Recently, one of the television companies showed a documentary about the famous hermit Agafya Lykova. In it, a 74-year-old woman talked about how she lives and mentioned a violent case. Now the last of the Lykovs family has 6 goats, about 10 chickens, 3 dogs and a bunch of cats. In order to feed them, a woman has to work very hard. She catches fish, looks after the vegetable garden where potatoes, tomatoes, radishes grow, and also stores hay and other feed for goats. She also bakes bread herself with sourdough from 2 types of flour. Prayer takes a special place in her life. You need to pray for help. I pray for everyone, says the hermit. The woman also told about the unpleasant moments of her life. We thought to live in virginity. It is impossible to talk about this, about Tropin. I told him with a threat, you will only offend me an orphan, God will punish you. But I was not afraid of anything, she told the author of the film. Judging by what Vasily Peskov wrote in his story, Ivan Tropin is Agafya Lykova's failed husband. He is an old believer and appeared at the settlement when the hermit was about 45 years old. First, the man brought her food from Obaza, and then moved to Hermit. Agafya even asked permission to marry. She wrote a letter about this to the nuns on the Yenisei. The husband wanted to move to Tashtip, but was refused. After which Agafya refused to marry and asked the nuns for permission to tonsure a nun. Agafya Lykova hopes that there will be a woman who agrees to move to her house on the Hermit River and help with the housework. She herself is already struggling to cope with the daily work. But the assistants do not stay in the taiga. The hermit is looked after by the inspectors of the Kokoski Reserve. And food and gifts are periodically brought to her from the Kemerovo region and from the Altai Republic. The Lykov family has lived in isolation since 1937. They came there from the Altai. Before the start of the war, the family was still in contact with the world. Count Lykov was even offered a job. But then everyone forgot about the existence of hermits, thinking that they went to Tuva. In 1978, geologists stumbled upon the taiga capture on one of the tributaries of the Abokan River in Caucasia. By that time, there were 5 taiga residents. The head of the family, Karp Lykov, son Savin, 45 years old, and Dmitry, 36 years old, and daughters Natalia, 42 years old, and Agafya, 33 years old. In 1981, Agafya's brothers and sister died one after another, and in 1988 his father passed away. Since then, the woman has lived alone. Next year Agafya Lykova will turn 75 years old. Let's take a look at the events of Nikon's reforms in Russia. None of the most faithful sons of their fatherland went to organize meetings in the royal mansions. No one began to dismantle the paving stones in the royal court or erect barricades around the Kremlin with a request. Register votes from the opposition. People of the time unambiguously interpreted that persecution and bitterness does not come from royal decrees and not from the Tsar or Patriarch himself, but from the evil one. From the Antichrist, who uses lies and deceit and speaks through the lips of those enslaved by himself. Instead they took off from their homes. They took the most precious things, books and children, and went away from the servants of the evil one. So Lipovans appeared in modern Romania, Lithuania, Nekrasov Cossacks in Turkey. Old Believer settlements on the borders and abroad of the empire. Our great-grandfathers did the same after the 1917 revolution, when the enemy of the human race, through his minions, reached the more remote corners of the country. This is how communities appeared in Manchuria and later in Australia, Bolivia, Canada, USA. Not to mention the skeets and secret settlements in the impassable wilderness, the full list of which is known only to God. At the same time, they all remained the most sincere patriots of their homeland, did not hold any grudge against the persecutors, praying only that the Lord would not allow our country to completely plunge into the abyss of godlessness and Satanism. Press Secretary of President Putin Dmitry Peskov admitted that the president asked him a difficult question about old believers. Where did they come from, they say? And he didn't know. Alas, more than one press secretary did not know. The absolute majority of consumers of Massachusetts culture do not know that the old believers did not appear from anywhere. They have always been in Russia. Until the 17th century, all of Russia was old believer, it est I prayed to God according to pre-Nikon ranks. Probably, one could watch Dostal's quite solid film, The Split, or read the latest issue of the Dilettante magazine. Everything is written there about splits. About the fact that old believers, or ancient Orthodox Christians, live next to us. Recently reminded us because of a new letter from the #Hermit Agafya Lykova, who asked for help and received it. At the same time, a doctor visited her and even suggested that she stay in the hospital. But Agafya is not like that to exchange her skit for the Kemerovo hospital. It belongs to the chapel tradition, special Keelan Accord. And these old believers deliberately fled from the authorities and civilization to the forest. The chapels are old believers of the priestly direction, but in the 18th century they lost the last priesthood of the old ordination. They partook of communion once at the hour of death with spare gifts, which everyone keeps for this occasion. Academician Pokrovsky, who died last year, has done a lot of research about Christian chapels. He also published an interesting correspondence of the old believers, their writings, chronicles. In Soviet times, the Enkv even carried out special punitive raids against chapel Christians. Then they began to go even further into the taiga, into the mountains. Moscow researcher Agafya wrote about the Kilin agreement. Among the people of Kilin there were writers, folk philosophers, and chroniclers. Lykovs, Agafya's father, knew about the existence of a big world beyond the mountains with helicopters and all-terrain vehicles. And the writer Peskov, in his famous publications, exaggerated their savagery. But the Lykovs had an orientation toward flight from the world. And in this, the old believers show a completely authentic Christian flight from the world. Because of which many generations of ascetics went to the mountains and deserts. Only the Lykovs went to capture the whole family and lived there quietly. Of course, old believers have a distrust of the world that persecuted and destroyed them. And this distrust was combined with the Christian desire to get out of the world. Christian old believers went into wandering, hermitage, exile, and preserved themselves. But when the Lykovs had people from the mainland, they brought diseases with them. And the whole family became their victim, except for Agafya. That is why she now needs help. It is difficult to survive in the taiga alone. Now Agafya has a connection with the mainland and a church connection. Ever since Agafya re-established ties with the Old Believer Orthodox Church in 2011. Priests visit her regularly, she does not remain without confession and communion. They bring her what is needed for prayer. But her main path is her own, the hermit. To live like a monk, from the old Slavic word in, one, lonely. Thick walls of monasteries and obedience to the abbot are not needed. It is enough to observe the monastic rule, read the prescribed prayers and work. And here is a contradiction. On the one hand, the old hermit needs help, but she also needs loneliness. This is a very typical Russian cultural history. Therefore, to the question, where did the old believers come from, it is necessary to answer that the old believers are people of the Russian root. And they came from the very depths of the Russian people. In a sense they are this people in the utmost expression. Therefore, although our world can help Agafya and send her 200 kilograms of food, Agafya can help us. To help, for example, answer the president's question, which actually means where are we from? And understand yourself. I ask you to share these videos in your social networks, using the buttons under the video and subscribe to the channel. Please go and watch other videos about Agafya Lykova, which you see now on the screen in the end screensavers. There are a lot of rare and interesting facts about the hermit. Thank you all for watching.